Happy New Year! At last, 2016 is officially behind us. Welcome to 2017! Cheers! So today I'm going to be looking back at all of the wonderful books I read in the whole of 2016 and then setting myself some resolutions for 2017. I've compiled a list of questions to ask myself. So the first question is, how many books did I read this year? And the answer, drumroll please, I read 104 books this year, which is definitely my personal record. And what's really fun on Goodreads is that at the end of the year they give you a whole page of statistics about everything you read. So that's where I got the idea for question 2, which is to look at the longest and the shortest books that I read. So the shortest book I read last year, is Bitch Planet, which is a feminist dystopian graphic novel, and I bloody loved it. It does not have page numbers, so I don't know how many pages it was specifically, but not too many, and definitely a hell of a lot less than the longest book I read, which was Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. I mean, just look at this beast, it's huge. This one has 800 pages. That's how different these books are in size. Question 3 is, what was the most shocking moment in any book you read in 2016? And the answer to that is easy for me. By far, the most shocking moment in any book I read in 2016, in probably my whole life, was the twist in I Let You Go by Claire Mackintosh. Often when I'm reading a book and someone's told me that there's going to be a twist, it kind of ruins it because I'm sort of looking for the twist, trying to guess what it will be, and eventually, even if you think of like 100 options, if one of them was right, it kind of takes away that shock factor. I feel pretty confident in saying that you will not guess this twist. I really hope I'm not jinxing it, but read this book. Okay, question 4. Question 4 is, who was your OTP of the year? And again, that's an easy answer for me. Shug and Celie in The Colour Purple. Their story is so complex and rich and heartbreaking but wonderful, and you care so much about each of the characters individually. In fact, you really care about every character in this book. It's just, I love this one so much. Question 5, what was your favourite book cover of the year? And for me, that one would be The Square Root of Summer, which I actually didn't really like the book that much, which is a shame, but I just love this colour so much. I love the colours, the font, everything about it. I love looking at it. So even though I didn't really enjoy the book, I don't want to give it away. Is this really selfish? I don't want to give it away because I love having it on my shelf. I just think it's gorgeous. Question number 6 is, what was your favourite adaptation of the year? And for that, I think I'm going to go all the way back to January because I absolutely loved the film version of Room by Emma Donoghue. I thought it was wonderfully done. I usually have a real problem watching film adaptations. I always get excited, I always think they're going to be great, and I'm always disappointed. Basically every time I'm disappointed. But Room I thought was brilliant. I thought it was just as good as the book, possibly even better. It's blasphemous to say, but the acting was so brilliant, so that was my favourite adaptation. Question 7 is, what book made you cry the most this year? All the Bright Places by Jennifer Niven made me absolutely sob. Since reading this book, I have read a bit about why it's a little exploitative. I think it's a very useful book for people whose friends are going through depression. I don't think it's quite the right book to read if you yourself are depressed or having suicidal thoughts. So that's kind of the problem with it for me, but it made me absolutely weep. And then on the flip side to that is question 8, what book made you laugh the most this year? And that's easy, it's one I read just the other day, How to Win at Feminism. This is a book made by the creators of Reductress, the feminist satire website, which is hilarious, and this book was laugh out loud hilarious from start to finish. It kind of just made my stomach hurt from laughing. It was so good. Question 9, who's your new favourite author that you discovered this year? And again, I'm going to go back, not for the last time, to Claire Mackintosh. I'm a really big fan of thrillers, and these are 2 of the best thrillers I've read. She's currently writing a 3rd one and I'm so excited. I even got the chance to interview her on the phone this year, which was wonderful. So yeah, I'd say she's definitely my favourite new author of 2016. Question 10 is, what was your favourite book that you reread this year? And I reread quite a few this year. I reread The Colour Purple, Ella Enchanted, the whole Harry Potter series. I did a lot of rereading and I enjoyed all of them, I think. Okay, and now time to get into the important questions. So, question 11 is not really a question, I'm just going to do an overview of the ratings that I gave out this year. I only gave out one 1-star rating this year. last year. And that rating went to Watching Edie by Camilla Way. This one had to be a 1 star for me because I genuinely just found it offensive. Spoiler alert, so skip ahead like 5 seconds if you don't want to know what happens in this book. It was a really insensitive and gross use of rape as a plot twist, which for me is just never okay. I found it very, very upsetting. So that was my sole 1 star book for that reason. 1 star books for me are books that I actively want to discourage you to read. If I just personally really didn't like a book, but I didn't find it actively offensive, then in my head I kind of give it a 1.5, but for the sake of Goodreads I'll give it a 2, even though a 2 can mean that it was okay, a 1.5 in my head means that it was bad. But in my head, the only 1.5 ratings I gave were to DC Trip by Sarah Benincasa, which was a shock. I thought I was going to like that one. I don't know if I was just missing the point entirely, but I just didn't find it very funny. But I've heard a lot of people that loved it, so by all means go and read it. Maybe I was just reading it wrong, I don't know. My other 1.5 rating was to The Missing by Caroline Erickson, which actually came out on the 1st of January this year, but I got an advanced Kindle edition right at the end of last year. It was a thriller and just very, very generic, no character development at all, really. I wasn't interested in any of the characters the whole way through, so that was a 1.5 for me. Okay, 2 star books. These are books that I thought were okay, and I gave out 16 of them this year. One that I'm sure a lot of people would agree with me on, unfortunately, was The Cursed Child. I just didn't really enjoy the plot, to be honest. I thought it was fine, so it was a 2. One that I think is a more unpopular opinion, because I've heard so many good things about this book, it just didn't really do it for me, is Everything Everything by Nicola Yoon. There were things about this book that I loved. I really liked the way it was told. It included little images and little MSN extracts, and that was all really cool. But the story was predictable, I thought. The love story was very insta-love, unbelievable. I was not interested in their romance at all. I'm glad that so many people got something really great from this book. I just sadly was not one of them. Okay, 3 star ratings. Now these are books that I liked. I just didn't love them, so there were a lot of these this year. And some notable mentions for ones that I particularly enjoyed would be Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. I really, really liked the use of the photos in this book, but I just didn't fall head over heels in love with the story, so this one stayed as a very happy 3. And another 3 for me would be The Unexpected Everything, which was unexpectedly enjoyable. Okay, now we're getting to the really good stuff. My 4 star reads was my most popular rating category this year, which is fantastic because a 4 star rating means that I really liked this book. There are a ton of them, but some notable mentions: I Let You Go by Claire Mackintosh. I promise I'm nearly done mentioning this book, but not quite. And Bitch Planet, which I talked about earlier. This was really, really enjoyable. And finally, I read a massive 18 5-star books this year. So let's just get the Claire Mackintosh fangirling out of the way once and for all and talk about my favourite adult fiction books of this year. As I may have mentioned, I read both of these books this year. I only gave I Let You a 4-star rating, even though I think I actually liked it more. But it was just because there was just kind of one twist too many towards the end, which is why I brought it down to a 4-star, even though I loved it. I loved it so much. Possibly even more than I See You. But I See You was a definite 5-star. I mean, this was the example of the perfect thriller. So both of these are 5 stars in my heart, but the pedant in me had to make this one a 4-star. This one's a 5. Okay, now moving on to a 5-star young adult book. My favourite YA that I read this year was More Happy Than Not by Adam Silvera. I thought this one was absolutely mind-blowing. It was so unique. Basically, it's about a teenage boy in New York coming to terms with his sexuality. There is the existence of this memory-altering procedure that you can get done. Kind of like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. You can choose to take out memories. So that exists kind of in the background, but as he struggles more and more with his sexuality, the allure of this company becomes more and more relevant. That's all I'm going to say, but it was really wonderful. It left me absolutely reeling. My favourite 5-star non-fiction this year, or last year, come on Emma, We Were Feminists Once by Andy Zeisler. I found it really, really powerful, especially because when I read it, I hadn't even considered some of those things before. So it was a real learning experience for me. It forced me to reconsider some of my own assumptions about what it means to be a feminist. I often find it a little bit hard to concentrate on non-fiction, but this one had me totally gripped. So 5 stars to We Were Feminists Once. 2016 was the year that I finally started reading graphic novels, but my absolute favourite 5-star was the first one I read, Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi. This is basically her own memories of her childhood in Iran, then her teenage years spent sent away to Europe where her parents thought she'd be safer, and then when she returned back to Iran. And it taught me so much. I just thought it was wonderful and beautiful and definitely recommend it. And then finally, a 5-star short story collection would be Hot Little Hands by Abigail Ullman. I've never really read or enjoyed short story collections before, but I loved this one so much. They're all about female sexuality and female bodies and coming of age. And it's been months since I read it, but some of these stories in particular still stick with me. I still find myself sometimes staring out of a window, obsessing over one of the stories in this book. It was just eye-opening, or mind-opening almost. I loved this one. I read it for myself and I bought it for a ton of my friends because I thought it was great. Okay, and my final question is, what are my reading resolutions for 2017? And I have 6. But I also have one overall resolution, which is to read more diversely. When I was first looking at how to tackle the problem of diversity in my reading, I was a little bit hesitant about whether to do specific diversity challenges because I didn't like the idea of turning it into a game. But ultimately I decided, I think, if it's something that helps you make more conscious choices about your reading, it can only be a good thing. So that is my reasoning for these first 2 goals. My resolution number 1 is that I'm going to do the Book Riot Read Harder challenge. I will link all the information below, but basically it's a challenge, I think, of 52 goals. I'll have to double check that. And the aim is just to tick off as many as you can. I'm going to try and do all of them, and it has categories like read a book published by a micropress, or read a book written by an immigrant. All sorts of different challenges, and the goal is to just get you thinking more about what you're reading. And so, very related to that is resolution number 2, which is I'm going to do the Diversity Bingo 2017. Again, I will link the information below. This was a challenge created by YouTubers, and you have 36 categories to check off. Again, I'm going to try and do all 36, and it includes categories like a book with a main character who has an invisible disability, or a contemporary book about an arranged marriage. So again, it's really the aim is to get me to seeking out books more actively and consciously. My resolution number 3 is I'm going to read more own voices books. So I'm going to do that in general, but also a particular thing I thought I could try is whenever a book becomes very popular that's about somebody from a marginalised group, but not written by somebody from that marginalised group, I'm going to instead look for an own voices version. So, for example, Me Before You became very, very popular last year. I didn't read it, but a good thing to do would be to look instead for a book written by somebody who is quadriplegic. So in this case, I could look instead for Francesco Clark's Walking Papers. My resolution number 4 is that I'm not going to set a Goodreads reading goal, because this year I don't want to read so many books. My resolution is to read more slowly. Earlier last year, I did the Slowathon, which I really, really enjoyed. I've always been a speed reader, so this year my resolution is just to slow down and take more time and read more actively. Maybe read out loud. That's a really nice way of getting more engaged with your books. Resolution number 5 is to read some books in translation. I think it's really, really fascinating how differently speaking a different language can cause you to see the world. It actually does change the way that you form your view of the world. While ideally I'd be able to speak some different languages and actually read them in their native tongue, I think second best is to read some books that were written by someone with a different perspective of the world. And then finally, my resolution number 6, which I am terrible at, is I'm actually going to read my own books. I currently have 70 unread books on my shelf. That's not the worst I've ever heard, but it's the worst it's ever been for me. I'm not going to set any specific goals. I tried doing Project 5 last year, where you have to read 5 before buying one, but I failed miserably. So I'm not going to set any specific rule that I'll just break. I'm just going to try and be more mindful and make an effort to actually read the books I already own and bought and are sitting there waiting for me. So every time I get all excited about a new book and I'm getting there ready to buy it online or whatever, I'm just going to stop, take a second, walk to my shelf, see if there isn't something just as exciting waiting for me on my shelf. So my camera is literally about to die, that's why I'm starting to speak quite quickly because I can see it flashing, but please do comment below and let me know what your own goals are. I would love to hear about them, what your favourite books were from 2016, and I hope you have a wonderful year. Cheers! Ooh. Question 7. Oh, what's question 7? I'm dribbling.